second most hated Corbyn and arguably the most hated Piers. It's quite impressive to come so near the top of the Piers and the Corbyn charts. He's grabbed the headlines again. I mean, he's a bit of a lovable old crank in some scenarios, but I have to say on this occasion I found his activities slightly less than lovable. Well,
so Piers Corbyn often puts his foot in it, but more than that, he says some completely bonkers things. He's got, got a habit of doing this. And sometimes it's that sort of lovable type, the eccentric old uncle or whatever. Sometimes it's a bit insidious. Yeah. I mean, we had this back in February when he was handing out the leaflets comparing the vaccination programme to the Nazi Holocaust, and you think, it's just, I mean, that's really repugnant, So there's that. But in all of these cases, I do get a bit nervous when we get the police involved. Now, I saw the video of him talking about the MPs and what did he actually say? This is in the Mirror, this article. He talks about how he ranted that people should hammer to death politicians who voted for COVID restrictions. However, watching the clip, I can see it's weird and eccentric, but it is hyperbole. It's not a literal... He's not literally saying go and murder anyone. Similarly, when he says you should go to their offices, and I don't know... And he sort of said, well, if I were you, I'd burn them down. But it was, I think, intended to be a joke. In fact, everyone in the clip laughs. Yeah. I think the idea that we escalate this to incitement to violence, I'm very nervous about. As I say, I'm not supporting Piers Corbyn. I don't think it's incitement to violence, and I think we need to push away from that kind of idea. It is awkward, though, isn't it? I mean, it was interesting after David Amess was killed, obviously, and there was no suggestion that he was killed off the back of anything like Piers Corbyn or anyone else who was talking about vaccine mandates or anything. It's an entirely separate issue. But there was this kind of... sudden burst of activity to try and tighten up regulations about online anonymity and various other things. Which was unrelated.
An attempt to...
That's my worry about it. That had absolutely nothing to do with that horrific murder. Nothing to do with it. But they used the murder as a pretext to push through these other measures, these draconian measures. I worry about this all the time. I always think with incitement to violence, you have to apply the equivalent of what the Americans call the Brandenburg test. There has to be a very strict threshold. Freedom of speech does matter, and sometimes that means you're going to get awful people saying awful things. I know that's important. So the test is effectively they've applied it or they've...
I get confused. Not the cake, is it? This is the gate.
No, this is no. Oh no, sorry. This is to do with a legal precedent where it was applied previously. Yeah. And this was to do with a man, I believe, who was handing out leaflets. It was propaganda leaflets. I can't remember the exact case. Yeah. And some people theoretically applied it after Donald Trump. You remember after he was banned from Twitter. Yeah. And they were saying, does his statements meet the Brandenburg test? But in order to meet the test, it has to be an imminent threat of violence that you have directly precipitated with your words. Actually, Trump doesn't meet that threat.
No, he certainly didn't. I thought his ban was outrageous. But it's a little bit back to the sort of pre-crime as well, isn't it, to some extent? I mean, you're kind of saying it's in the eye of the beholder. So, you would think there would need to be some violence before you're arrested for incitement to violence as well.
I mean, and I've seen as well people, I mean, Priti Patel has said, it's written in this article here, Priti Patel said that I back the police to take the strongest possible action against him. Am I wrong to be nervous about this? I find this a bit...
By your own description of it, it's his tone when watching the video is your defence for it. So if he would have said those words but definitely meant it, then even you're saying that then maybe the police should be involved. Well,
I'm not, actually. I think even if he had meant it, I don't believe that there is a correlation between that and real-world violence. I think...
Sorry. Yeah. No, it's good that when do you end up drawing the line then at that stage? You've effectively separated the words from the actions permanently, which means you can say anything you want, and it's only after the event then someone could question it. Well, maybe this is a time to look in to say maybe you shouldn't, to remind Piers Corbyn that he probably shouldn't have words that could make someone go...
I think that's reasonable. I think he should probably be given a stronger rap on the knuckles than he's previously had, because he is a repeat offender in this regard, and actually it is... I mean, I don't. Again, I understand you don't want to make it criminal, but he is bringing the national conversation into disrepute. He is the brother of... that's not irrelevant. He's the brother of a recent man who stood for Prime Minister, who is basically anti-Semitic, is an extraordinary conspiracy theorist. He is encouraging people to show, at the very least, a disregard for the safety of MPs and the offices they work in.
Sure, but there are better ways to challenge idiocy than involving the police. This is my point. And I think I'm not at all supporting anything that Piers Corbyn has said, but what I'm saying is, the idea that we have bought into, in all of these cases, again and again, it's how do we explain away acts of violence? Well, we say they must have seen this film or they must have heard this person ranting on a street corner. But actually, in reality, there is rarely that correlation. It rarely exists. And I don't like this faith-based position.
The godless universe and everything is
why do
coordinated. The bouncing of atoms.
You know, I wasn't going to go down that route.
The works of democracies get
the primeval stew. It's